Hello, and welcome back to the channel. It's been a bit since my last video. I recently spent several days in 2 Corinthians observing the text and applying proper biblical hermeneutics. I wanted to test an interpretation that was made by a preacher at Sunday service 2 weeks ago. It looks like I'll be preparing a video to share the fruits of that study soon. Now, I learned something new this week. As a preterist, I argue against the notion of a future rapture of the church to heaven, inaugurating a 7-year tribulation to be suffered by the Jews before Jesus comes back and rules from an earthly throne in Jerusalem for 1,000 years, where the temple will have been rebuilt and the Mosaic sacrifices reinstituted. Today, I will share how to make an objection to a common proof statement futurists use to advance the pre-trib rapture doctrine. Now, Berean Bible Church is one of my favorite channels on YouTube. They're on Rumble as well. Now, each year in April, Pastor David Curtis and the church family host a spring conference. I hadn't viewed any of the video presentations by the chosen guest speakers this year, so recently I checked and found a message delivered by Gary DeMar, who is a senior fellow at American Vision, and I learned something new from him. I learned an answer to a popular objection to full preterism offered by futurists, namely premillennial, pre-trib rapture dispensational Zionists. I give Gary credit for what follows. Now, this is another example of careful biblical observation and the use of proper hermeneutics, especially giving regard to audience relevance, which is identifying how the original audience understood the message that was delivered by the author. Now, a popular argument for a pre-tribulation rapture is the claim that while the church is mentioned 19 times in the first 3 chapters of the book of Revelation, in chapters 4 to 18, it completely disappears. Similar to the way dispensationalists place a gap in time between the 69th and 70th weeks of Daniel, they place a gap between the last verse of Revelation 3 and the first verse of Revelation 4. It's in Revelation 4:1 that the church supposedly will be raptured because there is no mention of the church in chapters 4 to 18. Now, is it true that the word church appears 19 times in Revelations 1 to 3? Here's how Gary tested that claim. The first 3 chapters of Revelation deal with 7 first-century historical assemblies of believers in Asia Minor. The church in Ephesus, the church in Smyrna, the church in Pergamum, the church in Thyatira, the church in Sardis, the church in Philadelphia, and then lastly, the church in Laodicea. Now, each message to the 7 churches ends with the following, quote, "Whoever has ears, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches." These are all individual congregations of Jesus followers. There is no mention of the church as universal and worldwide in Revelation 1 to 3. If Jesus meant the universal church at a time just before a so-called rapture, he would have used a phrase like the whole church, which we find in Romans 16:23. Instead, Jesus refers to actual congregations in a limited geographical area in the first century. Now, we know this is true since there were other local churches in the Roman Empire at the time, like the church in Rome. There was also the church which is at Cenchrea. We see that in Romans 16:1. All of the churches of the Gentiles, Romans 16:4. The church that met in the house of Aquila and Priscilla, Romans 16:5. All the churches in Romans 16:16. The churches in Corinth, in Galatia, Philippi, Colossae, and Jerusalem. So if the number of times a word appears is important, and Revelation 4 to 19 is said to be about Israel, why does the word Israel only appear once after the supposed rapture of the church? And that not until Revelation 7:4. One would think that if the church is in view in the first 3 chapters because the words church and churches are used 19 times, then shouldn't we expect to find the word Israel used more than once after chapter 3 if the entire 7-year period That's something that never is mentioned in Revelation, is about Israel. The word Israel does appear in Revelation 21:12, but then the word churches appears in 22:16. So using the argument that the word church does not appear after Revelation 3 is a very poor argument in support of the rapture of the church, since the church is simply not mentioned in Revelations 1 to 3. And come to think of it, using Revelation 4:1 to describe the rapture of the church is nonsensical. Here's the verse. After these things I looked, and behold, a door standing open in heaven. And the first voice which I heard was like a trumpet, speaking with me, saying, Come up here, and I will show you things which must take place after this. The voice called to John for the purpose of John to visit heaven in the Spirit, to be made aware of certain events that were soon to take place. And that's it. Please think on this. It's important for us who understand the fulfillment of all prophecy, as Jesus declared in his Olivet Discourse, to share arguments like these and let the power of the written and spoken word break the spell that binds the majority of evangelical Christians to a false hope of a future return of Jesus and blinds them to his finished work and our dwelling with him in the new covenant kingdom he established by his sacrifice. I'll leave that here for now. If you have any comments or any questions, by all means, place them in the comment section. I'll actually put the link to the video by Gary DeMar in the description. God bless.